Nothing contained in this videocast is intended to encourage the use of illegal substances. This videocast represents only the opinions of the host and their guests and should not be taken as medical or legal advice. In no way does listening, reading, corresponding, or interacting on social media with our content establish a doctor-patient or legal relationship. The content here is intended to share thoughts and opinions and foster constructive discussion. Please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions concerning cannabis. The views expressed by hosts and guests on this videocast are not necessarily the views of Global Cannabis Times or any other company with which the hosts and guests are associated.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Going Global, a Global Cannabis Times videocast that looks to act as the eyes and ears on the ground in emerging worldwide cannabis markets. I'm Jim Ickes. I'm an attorney at the law firm Zuber Lawler, and I'm here with a good friend of mine, Jack Grover from Grove Bag, a cannabis packaging and technology company located in Cleveland, Ohio. Good afternoon, Jack. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Jim. Thanks so much for having me. How are you?
Doing just fine. I've been looking forward to this discussion with you. Jack and I have had quite a few in-depth discussions about the cannabis industry, and he certainly has a unique perspective, given the fact that his company sells some of the top packaging and bags in the industry, and it's global. So, completely unique perspective. And I guess, Jack, as we dive into it, tell a little bit about Grove Bags and some of the technology behind your product.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Jim. So we started the business about 8.5 years ago. And really our most notable product was our initial product, our flagship product called TerpLoc, which is extremely popular solution for curing and storing the cannabis world over. Reason the TerpLoc is so popular and why it's afforded us, this really amazing journey so far, is because we've taken a very different approach to curing and the shelf life of the plant with the material, which we'll get into later. But it's used around the world. It's really allowed us to see a lot of incredible things and learn a lot and develop an interesting perch from which to have seen the industry grow and develop. So we've really been in, probably myself personally, I've been in over 1,000 cultivation sites around the world on 6 continents. So I've really gotten to see a lot of incredible and humbling things for sure. And it's been quite a journey. And then we've got some other products that we've released and that are in the works, and always taking the approach of we want to create products that are greener and offer dramatically better results and enhancing processes and achieving efficiency and quality at scale in cannabis. And we're really proud about the conversation that we feel we've helped start around curing and around the long-term viability of the plant, water activity level in the plant, the entourage effect and synergy effect of flavonoids and cannabinoids and terpenoids and how those things interplay. And we feel it's really helped the cannabis industry get to a better place, and very excited about what's ahead.
Right. So I got 2 questions. So I'm going to go back a little bit. I always like to dig into why you chose cannabis, and then also give us the origin story of Grove Bag, heralding out of Cleveland, Ohio, which for those who are watching this may not know, I'm also a Northeast Ohioan. So the fact that Jack's company heralds out of Cleveland is a big deal. So why don't you dig in a little bit, Jack, and tell us about your why in cannabis, and give us a little origin story.
Yeah, I think those two things in my place, and I think in a lot of people's cases, are somewhat interconnected to a degree, right? But I think for me, really, growing up in Cleveland, I was, just the environment I was in was, very anti-cannabis. And it's not that my parents were overwhelmingly conservative or anything of that nature. I think they, wonderful parents and lucky to have grown up where I did and everything. But the point I'm trying to make is it was just so much anti-cannabis Kool-Aid out there. So it really wasn't until my brother Charlie, who has cerebral palsy, told me how much relief he got from cannabis. He went out to California for law school, which is, pretty incredible of his own right. This guy with cerebral palsy, appeals to UCLA law school and says, hey, give me a scholarship so I, can, get somebody to write down my papers and I'll dictate my papers. And he did successfully graduate. I think he's the only person with his, condition who's ever actually done that there. But one of the great things that, he came in contact with out in LA was medical cannabis. So fast forward a few years and he comes home, to visit Cleveland. He's got really horrible muscle spasms one day. I mean, like he's hunched over and his face is really red and vascular and he's, visibly very uncomfortable. And, growing up together, he always had, medicines for this, medicines for that, medicines, to help his muscles, medicines to help go to the bathroom, medicines to, for this side effect. And it's just kind of a carousel, so to speak, right? And, we could sit and indict Western medicine and the pharmaceutical industry and the problems with the structural issues with our healthcare system as much as we want. That's not really the point. The point is, I, just by being very skeptical, called one of my buddies who came over and rolled a joint for Charlie and lit it and hit it and got it going and put it in his mouth, and he took a couple puffs. He coughed a bit, right? Because he's in a wheelchair and he has a compressed diaphragm, and he really, smoking combustion is not his preferred consumption method, let's
Gotcha.
say. Um, but it was amazing because even though he had this little bit of a coughing fit, like, is what I'm trying to communicate, right? Like, he still his kind of shoulders rolled back and he kind of opened up and his face relaxed and, kind of that, vascularity receded a little bit from his forehead being so strained, just kind of like hunched over and
Yeah.
really tight pain. I mean, best way I could describe, his pain that he was feeling then was just like, imagine your whole body is just Charlie horses, right? You ever have
Yeah.
your bath, just Charlie horse so bad and cramp so bad, it just kills you and
Yeah.
it's painful. And imagine that over your whole body. I mean, we really, we take for granted how lucky most of us take for granted how lucky we are. But he's, so it was just it blew me away. I guess what I'm trying to say, kind of seeing the relief he got from cannabis, and I grew it for him a little bit in Cleveland. Procured it for him, learned a little bit about the plant that way far before I ever became a smoker or a patient myself.
Time wise, when was?
So this is like, I don't know, this is like mid to late 2000s, right?
Gotcha.
Like
Okay.
leading up to 2010 and going out to Boston, which like that it was a whole another world, kind of seeing the East Coast weed game up close.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that East Coast, or even like the college town, weed game, back before we had such easy access across the country, that was a whole economy that I think a lot of people are still unaware even existed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, once I got out there, I was talking to other people like, hey, do you have, problems with, this? And a lot of people have problems with weed and dragging out in all sorts of crazy ways with paper bags or this or baking racks or baking it, or there were people doing all these terrible things that I knew just like had no basis in like the actual like physiology of this plant. So I kind of always had the suspicion from that because especially like in Ohio, like I remember one time I grew and I got like maybe 6 good jars of some ugly buds, but 4 of them were like I couldn't give them to him to smoke because it was just it molded so bad because I didn't burp it properly. And there was a lot of forums and stuff, and Hash Church eventually came out, which I think they're really an unsung platform in terms of how much educational product, in terms of scientific information
Yeah.
about cannabis they provided. But really, like we were always like that kind of gave me the food science angle. So eventually, when I saw like everything happening in cannabis and 2014, in terms of, Washington, Colorado going rec, I had a suspicion that there were a lot of operational inefficiencies and a lot of non-science backed methods for the life cycle and supply chain of the product. I mean, easily evident just in the myriad of products that were being used to accommodate, for moisture percentage and for terpenes and for these different things. And I realized that no one had ever really taken a food science perspective to the actual understanding and the nature of the plant, physiology of the plant, what's truly going on in there, what defines the difference between drying and curing flower, and some of these levels, water activity level, particularly as it revolves around certain dominant terpene profiles. Nobody had really gone into, and even for the first couple of years of the business, it really wasn't until fall 2018 when Oregon had its first major glut that anybody, even in mass, really cared about this idea of viability, or product quality over the duration of a supply chain. It was on nobody's mind. I mean, we're still talking about the era when people were bringing trash bags full of flour into a dispensary and walking off,
Right.
dry, dumping on the counter and saying, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And haggling out a price with the manager, or the manager
Right.
was on the phone with the owner and haggle through them. And yeah, people, a lot of people forget that era. But that's
Early California
yeah.
dispensaries.
Yeah, and then Charlie obviously being out in LA, and seeing the medical market out there, it was a unique perspective that I guess I never really appreciated how unique of a window that gave me,
I
kind of
bet.
into cannabis as it was forming. I mean, I think, right, I think you talk about people that are, lucky to be around stuff that's happening. Like, I think lucky to be around stuff that's happening and be exposed to it, come back to Cleveland, where we make stuff and we're a bit away from the noise, but it's always a short flight away. I think it's, at least for us, at least for me and where I've been at in my journey, I think it's been a good recipe. But all these things kind of contributed, I guess, in a long roundabout. What I'm saying is to, this unique position and perch that we had on the plan, our hypothesis, and which has taken us to where we are at now on this call.
I love how your brother inspired you really to go down this path, it sounds. And then you got real granular about trying to make sure your brother had the best medicine available. But I love confluence of events and time and how it sends people on a path. So what was your background in packaging or bags, and how did you decide to make the leap into that part of the business and actually founding Grove Bag?
So I was actually working in tech before cannabis. Was obviously somebody who had a relationship with the plant, a lot of interest in it, spent a lot of time around it, but didn't make that jump really for probably till I was I guess 20 and 24 when we made kind of that jump and started the company and started researching and trying to develop products and iterate, TerpLoc and excise and some of these things that we've patented and released over the years. Yeah, it's tough to say.
As they always say, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So I think you saw what was being used and probably projected that, hey, this is prohibition's going to unravel here at some degree, and this industry is going to advance, and seemed like you saw the opportunity to go meet the need, and also sounds like you've had to educate a lot too, which is uh,
It's
wonderful for the industry overall.
self-educate a lot. Yeah, I think it's tough to talk about great companies, right? As in my position, because you don't want to sound, nuts or histrionic or detached from reality, right? But like, so I want to be very clear with like the asterisks of like, um, I'm not making a blanket statement about this person's character. I'm talking about a specific aspect of a specific achievement.
Right.
It's something that I hope to replicate in our specific way and this in a small way in our industry, right? So all of that being said, right? I think one of the things that Tesla has done very well in the electric car market is create a tremendous amount of conversation, increase the competitive nature of the playing field, and fundamentally altered the way the automotive industry does things and the way our conscious as consumers and as stakeholders in the economy, environment, the way we approach energy and electric cars. And I think that in and of alone is a massive achievement separate from the company. And I think for us, what we feel will be our massive achievement separate from our business is getting the industry to a collective consciousness where it is critical and scientific about water activity level, about the long-term viability of the plant, about sesquiterpenes and terpenoids and flavonoids and how those different things relate and degrade into each other, about understanding, preferred gas mixtures and environments for the long-term storage of the plant, as well as for the curing environment and everything that means in terms of, processing residual sugars and chlorophylls of the plant and that passive enzymatic process, right? I think all of that combined, if we're doing all of that, then people are going to have, empirically a little bit better medicine. They're going to have a little bit better experience with the product. Business will operate a little bit more efficiently. They'll be able to be a little bit more profitable. We will have, done something which I think is pretty cool in cannabis. So that's always been, part of, it's always had to be part of our goal is right that education and, leveling up that and also taking that risk. Maybe someone creates a better system than passive modified atmospheric gas exchanges.
Can you explain that a little bit for the layperson, what that means and kind of how you're talking about TerpLoc technology and how that works?
I am there. So the best way I could explain that is kind of pitching it by an analogy. When you're in the grocery store and you look for a bag of pre-cut, pre-washed salad, Jim, and it's all chopped up, those lettuces and radishes and carrots and cherry tomatoes, and they're in that bag ready to go. And you just open that bag and dump them on your counter. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, those veggies would wilt in a couple hours, wouldn't they, outside of that bag? But in those bags, they stay fresh in the fridge for a couple of weeks. They'll even stay fresh for a couple of days on your counter. And the reason for that is not because we throw them in the fridge or anything. The reason for that is those are passive modified atmospheric films that are structured to try to maintain a very specific atmospheric environment within that bag. So it takes into account the physiology and the respiration nature of those different vegetables. And it takes into account, the ideal gas exchange for those things to slow the ripening, right? And we create this film that operates almost as a lung, if we will, to expel things like some of these ethylene gases and some of these gases that would ripen plants to maintain a hydrogen, nitrogen-rich environment within that bag, along with some other atmospheric conditions. But essentially what that's doing is it's dramatically slowing down the rate that produce is going to wilt and allowing us to have, fresh, healthy, nutritious, safe, clean lettuce and have this longer supply chain, right? So TerpLoc is a type of passive modified atmospheric film that we spent a lot of time researching and designing and tweaking around the unique physiology of cannabis. And we've continued to refine it as we've learned things over the years and, learn things about terpenes, kind of these different classes, and the industry has scaled up. But fundamentally, it's a passive modified atmospheric film that we purposed around the unique physiology of cannabis. So what allowed us to do that and really go from testing to having very defined parameters that have really guided a lot of our white papers and a lot of our open source research on terpenes and cannabis.
Well, where could we find that, Jack?
You can find a lot of that on our website or on YouTube, but
okay.
Got another big study that we're doing right now on terpenes that with Dr. Allison Justice, which I think is going to be really monumental. But I think the sum of that, what I was trying to say there is once the Farm Bill passed, we were able to use high terpene hemp to go from to confirm a lot of our suspicions and then to answer a lot of questions that we had formed over the prior couple of years of research. And that's really allowed us to make some even more impactful products and really, I think in general, elevate the conversation level we're having and we're challenging ourselves to have as participants in this industry.
Fantastic. So it's a global industry now. Where are you operating? I know that you're doing things in Germany, but if you could maybe dig into that a little bit.
Yeah. So obviously HQ's here in Cleveland. We've got a nice presence out in LA, and we've got some team members scattered about, but certainly Thailand has been a busy market for us over the past year. I think that market was very hot off the beginning. I think it has some unique challenges because of relative humidity and infrastructure realities in terms of curing and storing and drying flower. So it was a great opportunity for us to really add value. And really, we've seen kind of a whole international market blossom that the United States is not participating in, and even surprising a lot of U.S. Canada executives, outside of some of the biggest companies, i.e., like a Curaleaf, are kind of not really participating at all. And there's the fact that there's a global economy that's formed for cannabis, and we're packaging flower that's going from between Canada and Germany and Colombia and England and hemp products and in Italy going from Japan and it's we're product in Thailand that's going EU GMP medical, or might be going to Israel, or might be going to New Zealand. It's a global agricultural market that the U.S. really hasn't participated yet in a meaningful way because we're holding ourselves back from it. Doesn't mean it's not happening, and really, we've been able to see it and be on the front lines of it. I just got a text today from
Real time information.
Yeah,
Breaking news.
This is a 100K order that's I'm not going to share the profane part. This is a 100K order that had me anxious. Client understandably rejected the shipment because it looked like that when it arrived. Sent it back to our facilities. This is going across the ocean over to Europe. This is then going back to northern Canada.
Wow.
In our bags. Obviously inconspicuous packaging here, but getting all opened up. Obviously, everything we're doing is EU GMP pharma. Open it all back up, and it was totally fine, and they were able to re-enter it in the system. Because it was good product. So we're participating in it, but most of us here in the U.S. aren't. And I think that's something that we're obviously deeply grateful for, but that's also something that I think we're more energized than most of our counterparts in the U.S., right? Because we get to see everything happening in a global market, and I think we maintain perspective on that, as we always have, right? Even during all the booms and busts and peaks and valleys here domestically. And I think that's probably what we're luckiest for. And that's probably I think part of the reason why we've been able to develop some good products and some good practices. I think one of our things has been we've never been too lost in the sauce. We've always had to come back to Ohio and be ostracized a little bit and have kind of that cold water poured on us, so to speak.
Ohio's going to throw the cold water on you. That's for sure.
Yeah, and even though we were in the dispensary the other day for rec, I went to a bunch of dispensaries actually just to take it in, right, and take some selfies of myself and send them to my aunt and uncle who always gave me a hard time.
And for our viewers, Ohio launched adult use last week on August 6th. Yep.
Yep.
So we're not quite a week in, but Ohio is obviously entering into a new phase, which is exciting.
Yeah, so, now everything's changed so much, and it's just like, what? Wait a minute, you guys,
right.
Yeah. So, but it's great, and it's I think it's a testament to our times that we can have so much change, positive change in such a little bit of time. It gives me hope and optimism for our future, right? But it's a remarkable thing, it's gobsmacking to go into a recreational dispensary in Ohio.
No doubt. I'm going to go back to a unique market that you indicate you're participating in, and that's Thailand. And obviously, Thailand went from, I think they opened it up as adult use from the gates, and then they tried to put the genie back in the bottle with a medicinal program, right? What is going on there, and how has it affected you, and how did you adapt?
I think they're still finding their footing, as we are obviously in the United States. I think Thailand in some ways is a pretty remarkable country. I think for anybody that's looking for a good model for public healthcare, I think that's a really good place to look, or
Interesting.
a good solution to the healthcare problem. There's a lot of things in Thailand that I think are right and incredible. There's also some things that obviously are different from how we do things here, how maybe either you or I would do things or prioritize things, but we're guests there, right? So we're merely participating in the market. I think we have to remember, right, that one, we're guests there. We want to build sustainable things and be good ambassadors of our business and our brand and our community. And secondly, we are just like, I think in the United States, it's fluid market here. I think we have to be prepared for fluid markets globally. And I think it would have been foolish for us to anticipate that it wouldn't be a fluid and developing situation the way it has been in a lot of markets, particularly what reminded me in Thailand, as I thought about early days, Oklahoma, where, there was, it was, a huge hive of activity, and to a degree it would probably be unsustainable, and part of that would be market forces, lots of players, price dropping, price corrections, stuff like that, and part of it would be there'd be some regulatory response as the unplanned nature of things came to bear. I think there's a great thing that all bureaucrats, can keep in mind, and all of us that operate in bureaucratic environments can keep in mind, right? Have you ever heard about the British mandate, or whatever they call their colonial government in India? You ever hear about the cobras? This is
Maybe.
yeah, this
Yeah,
is this
tell me about it. I haven't.
yeah, this is a real thing. Look this up, and it's just about the nature of unforeseen consequences, right? So the British were in India, and there was a cobra problem in this one city, very dangerous, poisonous snake, and it was not good for the development of the city. It was dangerous, all scary, right? All this stuff, real thing, right? Not to prey on anybody that whatever the phobia of snakes is called, but the British said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to reward people. You bring in these snakes, and we're going to give you a dollar, whatever. Let's say we'll give you a dollar. So okay, so the British are paying a dollar for these snakes. Well, we're in a very poor colonial disenfranchised place, right? And even if it weren't, people here, you're buying snakes for a dollar, people are going to start making snakes. So people breed all these snakes to sell them to the British, and then British immediately say, okay, we're not buying snakes anymore. And then what do the people do? Well, I don't want these cobras in my house. They throw them out, and the problem's worse than ever before. And I think kind of the
Okay, great.
story from, yeah, I think the lesson from kind of the story of the Cobras, and it's a real thing, look it up, is the unintended consequences of things. And I think in a sense, Thailand, which can be a more socially traditional country, I think um, we, as things have played out, we're right to expect that it would be a fluid environment. There would be some bumps and hiccups and calibrations as the country found a program that it felt comfortable with. But also at the same point in time, Thailand has benefited tremendously economically from cannabis. And I don't think it was ever going to go away. Would it shift? Would it go GMP? Would it change the regulatory nature? For sure. But I think if you believe in market and you believe in capitalism, you believe in the power of tax revenues, I think I think you were optimistic that it would have staying power the same way it has in the U.S. And
Well,
I think if you look at some of the regulatory challenges in Oklahoma and the way that market has kind of had to dial in and adjust, I think there's a lot that can be kind of learned from that.
I guess the ingredients that have gone into, I guess, the development of the cannabis industry overall has lend itself to having these little laboratories of experiment and various jurisdictions, both regulatory and product development, and obviously packaging. And then what's going to be interesting as we watch this play out is how the regulators and the industry itself has utilized, I guess, the manner in which it has evolved to just be a great industry because it's had to adapt. You've had to adapt. All your customers, our clients have had to adapt to a changing marketplace, and so have the regulators, right? They've had to, learn more about the plant. So it's interesting how it's going to play out. I think it's just going to make it better and more efficient of an industry. So what are your thoughts on that?
I hope so too. I think one of the difficult things for regulators is the rate of information and the rate of innovation is so difficult to manage nowadays. I think it's a very tough position to be
Yeah.
in. It's a very tough position to be in as a regulator. I think, we could talk a lot about high terpene hemp. We could talk about how, hemp in a lot of states is worth more than cannabis now.
Wow.
Good.
That's another question I have for you about how that market segment has influenced your business.
Legal
The hemp
weed,
segment.
legal weed, diet weed. I mean, the argument that, hey, the federal government actually legalized, cannabis already. It's just how it's classified in terms of, these different deltas and essentially different structures of THC. Yeah, very, very, very interesting stuff that we're at with this. Yeah, I think, every gas station is a dispensary now, if you think about it, right? I think people forget that. I think, yeah, in California, a lot of states, particularly rec states have a competitive rec program. A good pound of compliant high terpene pretty hemp is worth more than the equivalent pound of compliant, marijuana flower.
Wow. Uh, I
Which
guess,
which is insane to think about, right?
yeah, it is insane to think about. Whereabouts are the bags going with just within the continental United States regarding hemp?
We do a good amount of hemp stuff. I mean, hemp's a very it's like it. You'll know what I say when I say it mimics a lot of the behavior of some of the nutraceutical health food crazes. Like if you look at goji berries or any of the kind of
Mhm.
those health and wellness kind of boom bust fads, I think it fits very interesting in there. I think it mimics the cannabis industry in terms of the most successful players were very nimble and very light and trying to make sure that they knew they were making making hay while the sun shined, and they were trying to do it right away. I think a lot of them will tell you they never expected to be doing it as long as they have. I think it's a mess. I don't know whether or not state governments are going to figure it out. I don't know if it's going to be addressed with some sort of national legislation, but yeah, it's very interesting. All that stuff, but it's a huge part. I would say quietly. I mean, even loudly, you've seen most of the major marijuana companies try to address that market as they've realized how wildly successful it is compared to the cannabis market in terms of top line revenue and profitability right now.
I
Like
think
it's a far bigger market for a lot of players. It's far more profitable, but it's also way less oversight. There's a lot of dirty product, a lot of unhealthy product, a lot of counterfeiting issues, a lot of branding issues, a lot of issues with people getting sick, a lot of issues with people getting hurt. People. I think it's a consent thing, right? Like people understand like why did we have in this country, intense consumer protections? It's because you have a right to know what you're putting in your body. It's a consent thing. And I think a lot of people forget that. And I think that issue is rampant right now. Are there good brands and are there good companies doing things the right way? They're just playing in Delta 9 or playing in some of these gray area, cannabinoid spaces. Yes, there absolutely are. And I see them. But there is a huge lack of standards and enforcement and clarity. And I think it's taken the cannabis industry with it, and it's taken the cannabis industry hostage to it. I think that's why you see such tremendous investment by some of the leading, MSO, multi-state operating cannabis companies into alternative cannabinoids.
understand. I personally think that the 2018 Farm Bill kind of picked the lock to normalization in many respects, and we're seeing that play out, particularly on the beverage side with these hemp-derived products. I think low dose is a good entry point for what I refer to as the iceberg under the water. That's people who are rule followers and are maybe cannabis curious or had a bad experience in college because they, smoked a blunt with somebody and they turned into a paranoid mess on the floor. The low dose entry point with some of these hemp derived products, I think, is a key to normalization in many respects. That's my personal opinion. And I do like seeing these MSOs and bigger, medical cannabis, rec cannabis companies entering the space. It seems from a marketing, obviously, I'm a lawyer, I'm not a marketer, but from a marketing standpoint, it's on the hemp side, the advertising rules are more lenient, and it seems to me that a standard cannabis company entering the hemp space and selling products is another way to get their brand out and get brand identity out there, and let the future market know who they are, even right as cannabis continues to expand everywhere.
I think there's a lot of people that have that philosophy, and some of them, Grand, man, I think highly of that operation and what they're doing in terms of market development. So you look at what they're doing out in Japan. Japan, I'm very bullish on, is one of the most meaningful remaining markets too.
It's going to take some work.
There are CBD and nutraceutical cannabis, non-psychoactive, very much existent and a market for it in Japan. I think that's something to keep our eyes on. That's an exciting thing that I don't think enough people are talking about. And you look at Grind, who's in there with some of their CDB products, and in a meaningful way.
Very
in
smart.
Japan, at least my impression is they're in Japan in a meaningful way. I'm not on the board or an investor in Grind or anything, or an advisor to the company, but
Thanks for
from a consumer end, I'm and from a participant in the industry, and I'm impressed with what they're doing.
It's I guess from an outside looking in, it'll be interesting once Japan makes the leap and how the industrious Japanese influence the cannabis industry, Japan has influenced so many industries across the board. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Hypothetically speaking, Japan could already be, even with the current legislative status there, one of the top 5 markets in the world for U.S. cannabis flower, which I have to tell you, I see a huge amount of U.S. cannabis flower all over the world. I see it in cafes in Amsterdam. I see it in social clubs in Spain. I see it on the street in England. I see it on the street in Paris. I see it in Mexico. I know for a fact that high quality U.S. brands make their way all the way to India, and stuff like that. It's incredible. The market we're living in. People will pay a lot of money for again, another company, huge respect for it, do not have a relation with. People pay a lot of money for Jungle Boy's flower overseas. Some of these brands.
I imagine, and I'm sure a lot of the longstanding brands here in the U.S. are lining up, because it's a planetary opportunity, right? And it's only I personally think it's inevitable, right? Cannabis is inevitable. Plant has found a way to stay interwoven into our lives, even through prohibition. And as prohibition falls, you'll be able to buy cannabis probably in Antarctica at some point in time. So, hopefully you're starting your Antarctic division right now and getting prepared for that, Jack.
That's a can we've kicked for a while. That'll be a momentous day. It's really incredible. I wish more people kind of were in a position to, or had made the time to go to events like Mary Jane and kind of pay attention to the global cannabis landscape, because I think some of these American brands, really have opportunity to be, standard bearers in the, emerging, agra CPG space that is 95% of global cannabis.
It's you have the entire African continent slow. I mean, I think it'll be probably a quicker rollout in Europe. Obviously, the big domino was Germany falling, but the Czech Republic's in line. I think Netherlands are going to have an even more robust program that they're looking at.
I was just in the Netherlands. We have we do some work in that program. That's very interesting to have a front row seat to. It's incredible the scale and speed at which they're moving compared to some U.S. markets.
Well, obviously, the Dutch have got a few innovative. I mean, they've had genetics for a long time that they've been aggregating.
Yeah, I think a lot of that stuff's down in Spain right now. I think,
Okay.
Netherlands might be at number 3 US European cannabis market at this point, but outside, the Amsterdam culture and prevalence is not nearly what it was. But I would still say some of those social clubs in Amsterdam do far more volume and far more traffic and top line revenue than Planet 13 in Las Vegas or any of the flagship American dispensaries.
Interesting about Germany is they've opened that up right out of the gates, and I'm curious to see how that affects their market. I would imagine it'll only open it.
I posted up in Pre-Do and Me because my friend Captain Hooter was helping them out for a little bit. And at big kitchen on site, open for a large part of the day, can accommodate several hundred people at one time. I mean, major facility. It's someone over medicated when we were there and fell and took a fall, and they had people there so fast, and there was a nurse there, and it was so tight, and it was so dialed in. It can be done. I mean, all of our concerns and worst fears and everything about social clubs, it can be done. It can be done in a great, meaningful way, and the great business that are run right and are safe can be done with it right. Places you can hang out all day and smoke, and watch the game, and eat, and whatever.
Everything else that you do without cannabis, you do. Yeah. So
it's yeah.
I was having a discussion with somebody. We were talking about how low dose hemp derived Delta 9 beverages sold through the bar and restaurant channel may compromise the growth of like strictly cannabis related social lounges and clubs down the road. And my response to him, and you can tell me if I'm full of it, but the cannabis spaces, the cannabis only exclusive lounges will be based on experiences. I think more so.
Yes, and they'll be very niche products, and they'll be very CapEx heavy. And some people will be phenomenally successful in that space, and most people will lose their ass, as have most verticals of this and every other industry. But I think there's absolutely a place for it, and I think it will create a lot of value for people. I look forward to entrepreneurs being able to attack and address that market. And I think whoever wins, I think we'll see some pretty cool stuff that you and I will benefit from as consumers, and a place you and I can go and hang out, take our meetings, do a podcast.
I like cannabis because it is relatively bipartisan and to some degree, and there's a reason to be for it for many different reasons, mostly financial, tax revenue wise, certainly for the politicians. I think it's inevitable. The fall of prohibition, it's going to continue to be piecemeal, of course.
What happened in Colorado, right? Cannabis tourism fell off. People don't, there's aren't kids that are moving to Colorado from all over the country now that are going to dispensaries all day and shipping everything to their buddies back home and, making $40 a gram or whatever off hash. It's changed, right? It's a matured market, but like, what are things that we've seen, right? Well,
and by the way, it's not that anybody that's doing that in Colorado, right? That's just whispers in the wind, right, Jack?
Whispers in the wind, but we can safely assume that there was cannabis tourism activity in Colorado that has died off as cannabis become normalized around the country. And there was a point where there were more. You could say it's because of Colorado's coffee culture. There were more dispensaries in the state of Colorado than there were Starbucks. It was just a very, very saturated market, and I think it's still finding its equilibrium to a degree, or its balance, so to speak, in Colorado. But let's talk about some things aside from that. What does Colorado still benefit? What do we know irrefutably more than 10 years on with good public health data and good tax data about what happens in Colorado? Well, billions and billions of dollars of economic activity were generated. hundreds of millions of dollars in direct, state taxable revenue went to schools and infrastructure in the state of Colorado. Population of the state of Colorado is healthier. The population of the state of Colorado is less dependent on opiates, is less abusive of nasty illicit narcotics. The population of the state of Colorado has a lower incidence of alcohol abuse as well as other types of narcotic abuse. So people in the state of Colorado are measurably a little bit happier, and as
Increased
well.
domestic violence incidents.
Yeah, I mean, all of this stuff. You want to directly or indirectly tie it to cannabis, sure, but we can get in the weeds, and I'll go in front of, but I'll go in front of the United States Congress on live TV and say that it's undeniable that the cannabis program has benefited the public of the state, has empirically, tangibly benefited the state and the public of the state of Colorado.
In other states.
And many other states, but it's just we've got the data in Colorado, right? It's not an experiment anymore.
But the study out of Wisconsin about dispensary opening and increasing property values in the immediate area around them. I mean, that's very interesting, and we're just going to see more and more of these studies coming out, and that further bolster that prohibition needs to go away. So
no question. I think the genie's out of the bottle, and I think a lot more is going to happen on that. As much as happened in the last 10 years, I think even more on that is going to happen the next two.
I agree with you 100%. So we could go on and on. I imagine, Jack. Where do you let's do a little forecasting. What do you see happening over the next year? What's going to happen over the next 2 years, and maybe give me a 10-year vision for the cannabis industry?
Next year in the cannabis industry, regardless of any political toxicity or gridlock in the United States, we're going to continue to see meaningful growth. And we're going to see the global plant-based, medicine ecosystem continue to develop with or without direct U.S. Market leadership and involvement. The most meaningful thing that could happen in a 1, 2, or 10-year stretch is the United States taking meaningful legislative actions in terms of decriminalizing and having a non-FDA regulation of cannabis. I think people don't realize that legalization with FDA purview of cannabis would be wildly different than cannabis is right now, and there's a lot. I think a lot more that could go wrong than could potentially go right. But I think we're gonna see substantial movement there. I mean, people talk about rescheduling versus descheduling. I think that is a very, very important detail. I think a lot of people are ignorant of when they're not directly in the cannabis industry, because that implication and difference means everything for most operators in the cannabis space right now. But that said, I think this global plant-based revolution will continue. But the more sense of permanence that we give it, the quicker it's going to move. But I think we're seeing more G20 countries get on board and have programs. We're seeing a full 28% of the world's countries have a recreational or medical, have an official cannabis program, have an official policy towards cannabis other than criminal. Almost half the world's population has access to cannabis in some sort of meaningful way. We're really at a very interesting time, and we're at a critical time to hopefully get something meaningful done in the U.S. Within 2 years, do I think the U.S. will be participating in the cannabis market, regardless of what administrations in power? In power, like we're yes, regardless of what administration's in power. So can't believe I'm referring to our look at where things are, where I'm referring to our government that way here in this country, right? But regardless of what administration's in power, I think it makes too much sense. I think it's too much of a bipartisan issue. I do expect to see something meaningful happen in the 2-year stretch. In the 10-year stretch, I think we'll be in a totally normalized, global cannabinoid economy and plant-based medicine economy. I think we were just dealt a blow with, in terms of the overall plant-based, alternative medicine world. I think we're just dealt a blow with MDMA trials, and they weren't totally shut down. The U.S. government just said, "Hey, we need more data." which is definitely terrible, but the door is still open. This entire space is going to continue to develop, and cannabis has been the conversation bearer and the flagship standard for that. But I expect in 10 years we won't just be living in a normalized world in terms of cannabis, plant-based medicine, but in terms of the broader sense of alternative medicine that I mean that we're talking about right now. Wholly, I really think 10 years from now the world will look very different, and there's a lot of things that will look different. I think we'll have a very different approach to mental wellness and pharmaceuticals, mental health. I think we'll have some reckonings with these things that I think will be good for our society, good for global public health. But I really expect in 10 years, we'll be at a point where some of these brands that we're talking about, I think will be, $1 billion global CPG brands in this niche, or maybe even outside of this niche, and expand into culture and other things. And I think, a lot of those $1 billion brands are probably still in somebody's garage or backpack, or, still in the back of someone's mind. And I think that's an exciting thing, that so much of that is still in its infancy, despite how developed we are with, Jungle Boys and Cookies and some of these, 800-pound seemingly insurmountable brands. We're still, in the very beginning in some senses of this whole thing. Yeah. And I think that's exciting. So I try to, get people to see that, because I don't think everybody is as privileged as you and I are in terms of getting that energy and having that perspective.
Right. You have to almost be slightly outside of it a little bit, right? Not have taken so many lumps that a lot of our pioneers in the industry have, right? Having to deal with the direct regulation and uncertainty and the tax burden. And it's going to be interesting to see a lot of these folks really take off once the shackles of prohibition are removed and the onerous, taxing structure, and they can run a normalized business. Quick prediction: I think the FDA will have a hand in it for the medicinal side, and that's what's so unique about this plant is therapeutic component and the recreational adult use side component of it. So I've often said it's the pharmacy, and it's the bar and liquor store also. You can have fun with it, and it's good medicine. So it'll be extraordinary.
In some countries, it really is. I mean, the amount of detail and the amount of sourcing implementation and compliance and licensing and GMP and all the criteria we have to meet for these programs. It's pharmaceutical. Pharmacies are the ones dispensing in Germany.
Which that'll be interesting to see how that impacts it uniquely. But I think it's a great time to be alive. It truly is. I think we're fortunate to also witness probably the mass social change that's going to occur with the normalization of cannabis over the next 10, 20, 50 years. God willing, we'll hopefully we'll still be around to watch it, but it's going to be extraordinary. So
maybe that is the incredible thing about this country, Jim, the fact that a few years after war, people here can be like, oh man, that BMW is still cool. In a few years, people can go from, being, turning their nose up to cannabis to being like, oh, I went to the dispensary by my house. How cool is that? Maybe that's, maybe that chronic short-term memory is, going to serve to benefit us.
No doubt. And commentary on the United States. We have our, obviously our issues and our problems, but it certainly is a great place to innovate and do business, and remain so in cannabis and beyond. So I'm going to have a part 2 with you because I think we have so much more to talk about. I didn't even get into like technology as much as I wanted to, but I think we need to wrap it up. I want to thank Jack Grover from Grove Bag for sharing his wisdom today. I'd like to thank the Global Cannabis Times for giving us the platform to have these discussions. I'd also like to thank my law firm, Zuber Lawler, for allowing me to take a break from my practice and participate in these video cast discussions with folks like Jack. So thank you very much, and we're signing off.
Thanks so much for having me, Jim.
You're very welcome. Thank you.